Imagine waking up one morning to find you weigh as much as a small car, your bones creaking under the sudden immense pressure. Then, just as you're trying to understand what's happening, that crushing weight vanishes, and you start to float, unanchored, towards the ceiling. Outside your window, the air itself might be shimmering, one moment thick and heavy like water, the next so thin you can barely breathe. Oceans could surge into the sky, forming colossal temporary walls of water before crashing back down with unimaginable force, or even drift off into space in giant shimmering blobs. Buildings, cars, trees, everything not intrinsically part of the planet's core could be tossed around like a child's discarded toys. The familiar pull that keeps our feet on the ground, that holds our world together, would become a terrifyingly random force, and the world as we know it would cease to exist. Number 14. The sun could go haywire. Think of the sun. It's absolutely massive, right? Own incredible gravity is what holds it all together, like a giant, cosmic balancing act. If that gravity started to bounce around, stronger one second and weaker the next, our sun wouldn't be the steady, reliable star that warms our planet. It would become a dangerously unstable beast. What happens inside the sun is basically a constant, perfectly matched fight. Gravity is always trying to crush the star inwards, while the nuclear explosions happening at its core are always pushing outwards. If gravity suddenly got super strong, it would be like squeezing a gigantic fiery orange. This immense squeeze could make the sun burn way hotter and much brighter than usual. Imagine Earth getting blasted by a super-powered blowtorch, 1,000,000 times more intense than anything we've ever experienced. It wouldn't just be a hot day. It would be planetary incineration. Then picture the opposite. Gravity suddenly gets incredibly weak. The outward push from those nuclear explosions at the core would win the fight. The sun could puff up like a giant cosmic marshmallow, expanding outwards, possibly even swallowing the closest planets like Mercury and Venus. Even if it didn't actually eat Earth, a bigger, less dense sun would radiate its heat very differently. It might roast us from being too close to its expanded surface, or paradoxically not give us enough warmth if its energy was spread out too thinly over a much larger area. And this wouldn't be a single, isolated event. With gravity constantly fluctuating, the sun's brightness and the amount of heat it produces would be all over the place, changing from moment to moment. 1 minute, it could dim to a faint glow, plunging Earth into a sudden bone-chilling deep freeze. The next, it could flare up with unimaginable, blinding intensity. Solar flares, those enormous bursts of energy and particles the sun already shoots out, could become unimaginably larger and more frequent, powerful enough to completely strip away Earth's protective magnetic field and then our atmosphere. The very light it emits would flicker and change in color and intensity. One moment the sky on Earth might appear an angry deep red, the next an intense searing white, or perhaps a dim, unsettling twilight even when it should be high noon. Life on Earth, which has evolved to depend on a predictable and stable amount of solar energy, would find these chaotic conditions utterly impossible to survive. Plants wouldn't know when to grow or photosynthesize. Animals, including us, would be exposed to lethal doses of radiation during periods when intensified solar activity bombarded the planet, or freeze to death during the sun's dimmer, colder phases. The sun's corona, its outer atmosphere, might also behave erratically, expanding and contracting with the gravity shifts, sending out unpredictable waves of superheated plasma and charged particles far more dangerous than the regular solar wind we experience today. This isn't just about making us uncomfortable. It's about the fundamental conditions for life being completely and utterly destroyed, because our familiar star has turned into a terrifying, unpredictable cosmic liability. Number 13. your weight would change every second. Right now, you have a certain weight. That weight is just how much Earth's gravity is pulling you down. But what if that pull wasn't constant? What if it changed wildly and without warning every single second? One moment, you might feel perfectly normal. The next, gravity could triple. Suddenly, just standing up would feel like trying to lift 3 times your own body weight. Your legs might. Walking would be like wading through thick, invisible concrete. Your internal organs would be pressed downwards with enormous force. Even lifting your arm to scratch your nose would be an exhausting effort. Breathing would become labored as your chest struggled against the increased pressure. Then, just as you're groaning under the strain, gravity could plummet to near zero. Whoosh! You'd become almost weightless. If you weren't holding onto something, you'd float upwards. Objects around you, your breakfast, your pet, your furniture, would all start drifting. Imagine trying to eat when your food keeps floating off your fork, or trying to sleep when you can't stay on your bed. Pouring a glass of water would be an impossible mess, but it wouldn't just be strong or weak. It would be random. Gravity could flicker rapidly between crushing heaviness and unsettling lightness. 1 second you're pinned to the floor, the next you're bumping against the ceiling, then slammed back down again. The physical strain on your body would be immense. Your bones, not designed for such rapid and extreme changes in load, could fracture. Your muscles would be constantly fighting forces they couldn't predict. Your inner ear, which helps you balance, would be utterly confused, leading to constant, severe nausea and disorientation. Think about simple actions. Taking a step could be disastrous. If gravity suddenly increased as you lifted your foot, you'd be slammed down with painful force. If it decreased, your simple step could launch you several feet into the air, with no control over where or how you landed. Holding anything fragile would be a recipe for disaster. The very act of existing, of moving your own body, would become a dangerous and unpredictable lottery. Your sense of self, so tied to your physical presence and interaction with the world, would be shattered. You wouldn't just be heavier or lighter. You'd be a puppet on an invisible, insane string. Number 12. Kiss predictable days and nights goodbye. We take it for granted. The sun rises, the sun sets. A day is about 24 hours long. This regular rhythm is all thanks to Earth spinning on its axis at a pretty consistent speed and its stable orbit around the sun, both governed by gravity. If gravity started fluctuating randomly, this fundamental rhythm of our planet would be thrown into complete chaos. Earth's rotation could become incredibly erratic. A sudden increase in the gravitational forces acting on the planet, or within the planet itself, might cause it to spin much faster. Days and nights could flash by in a matter of hours, or even minutes. The disorienting effect would be severe, like living in a strobe light. The sun would streak across the sky, and darkness would fall almost instantly. Our body clocks, finely tuned to a 24-hour cycle, would be completely unable to cope. Sleep would become a fractured, impossible mess. Conversely, if gravity weakened in a way that affected Earth's angular momentum, our planet's spin could slow down dramatically. A day could stretch into weeks or months. One side of Earth would bake under relentless sunshine for an agonizingly long time, while the other side endured an equally extended freezing night. Temperature differences between the day and night sides would become extreme, far beyond anything life could withstand. It wouldn't just be the speed of rotation, but potentially the tilt of Earth's axis too. Our planet is tilted about 23.5 degrees. which gives us our seasons. If fluctuating gravity caused this tilt to wobble unpredictably, seasons would become meaningless. You might experience scorching summer heat followed by Arctic winter, then a balmy spring, all within a few chaotic hours or days, regardless of the time of year. Agriculture would be impossible. Furthermore, the Earth's orbit around the Sun is a delicate gravitational dance. If this dance were disrupted by fluctuating gravity, Earth might be pulled into a wildly eccentric orbit. Sometimes we'd be incredibly close to the Sun, other times flung far out into the colder reaches of the solar system. The length of a year would become a random number. The very concept of a calendar, of predictable seasons, of a stable environment tied to solar cycles, would be history. Our planet would be like a poorly thrown ball, its path and spin utterly at the mercy of an unpredictable force. Number 11. The ground you walk on would turn treacherous. We trust the ground beneath our feet. It's solid, stable, something we can rely on. But if gravity started to fluctuate randomly, that trust would be catastrophically misplaced. The very Earth would become an unpredictable and dangerous surface. Imagine walking down the street and suddenly the localized gravity beneath your feet lessens dramatically. Pavement, dirt, and rocks could lose their cohesion and suddenly become loose like quicksand or even float upwards in chunks. You could sink or find the ground literally disappearing from under you. One moment you're on solid Earth, the next you're scrambling as the ground dissolves or erupts. Conversely, a sudden spike in local gravity could compact the ground with immense force. This might cause sinkholes to appear instantly, swallowing roads, buildings, and anything unlucky enough to be on top. Pressure could also force underground water violently to the surface, creating flash floods and geysers of mud in unexpected places. Soil liquefaction, where solid ground behaves like a liquid, usually only seen in powerful earthquakes, could become a common and widespread phenomenon. Mountains and hills are held in place by a balance between their own mass and the force of gravity. If gravity weakened significantly, even temporarily, the sides of mountains could lose their stability. Landslides and rockfalls of unimaginable scale would become frequent, reshaping landscapes in terrifyingly rapid ways. Entire hillsides could simply slide away, burying valleys and towns. Even the density of the ground could change. If gravity increased intensely in one area, the rock and soil could become temporarily super dense, making it impossible to dig or even for plant roots to penetrate. If it decreased, the ground could become porous and weak, unable to support any weight. Foundations of buildings would be meaningless. Roads would buckle and break apart. The very landscape would be in a constant state of unpredictable flux, with fissures opening and closing, the ground rising and falling. Walking, driving, or even just standing still would be a hazardous activity, as the surface of the Earth itself writhed and shifted like a living, tormented creature. Number 10. Breathing would become a life or death gamble. We breathe without thinking. Air, a lovely mix of nitrogen and oxygen, is held around Earth by gravity, creating our atmosphere. Pressure of this atmosphere is just right for our lungs. But if gravity went, haywire breathing would become a terrifying, moment-to-moment struggle. If gravity weakened significantly and suddenly, Earth could start to lose its atmosphere. The air would literally begin to drift off into space. Air pressure would plummet. With less pressure, it would become incredibly difficult, then impossible for our lungs to draw in enough oxygen. It would be like being suddenly transported to the top of Mount Everest or even into the vacuum of space without a suit. We'd gasp for air that wasn't there or that was too thin to sustain us. Consciousness would fade quickly. On the flip side, imagine gravity spiking to incredibly high levels. The atmosphere would be compressed, pressing down on everything with immense force. Air pressure would skyrocket. Breathing in would be like trying to inflate your lungs while underwater at great depths. The sheer pressure on our bodies would be crushing. Our eardrums could rupture. Our lungs could collapse under the strain. The higher concentration of gases, particularly oxygen, under such pressure could even become toxic. And these wouldn't be slow, gradual changes. With random fluctuations, the air pressure could swing wildly from one extreme to the other within seconds. One moment you're suffocating in a near vacuum. The next, you're being crushed by an invisible ocean of air. Composition of the air at ground level could also change erratically. If gravity weakened, lighter gases might escape faster, changing the oxygen balance. If it strengthened, heavier gases, including pollutants, might become dangerously concentrated near the surface. Even the act of air moving, like wind, would become terrifying. Gentle breezes could instantly turn into hurricane-force winds if gravity suddenly shifted air masses around, or they could cease altogether, leaving stale, unbreathable pockets of air. The simple, unconscious act of taking a breath would become a conscious, desperate fight for survival in an atmosphere that was actively trying to either abandon us or pulverize us. Number 9. Fiery death from above, as satellites plummet. Thousands of satellites orbit Earth. They give us GPS, weather forecasts, TV signals, and internet. They are kept in their orbits by a precise balance between their speed and Earth's gravitational pull. If that pull became random and unpredictable, our skies would become a deadly shooting gallery. If gravity suddenly weakened around a satellite, its orbital speed would be too fast for the reduced pull. Instead of staying in its neat path, it would effectively be flung outwards, possibly escaping Earth's influence altogether and drifting into space. Goodbye, vital communications and observation tools. More terrifyingly, if gravity suddenly strengthened, a satellite's existing speed wouldn't be enough to keep it in orbit. It would be pulled downwards, its orbit decaying rapidly. Many of these satellites would begin to fall back to Earth. As they hit the thicker parts of the atmosphere, friction would cause them to heat up, break apart, and burn, creating streaks of fire across the sky. Not beautiful shooting stars, but uncontrolled re-entries of large, man-made objects. These wouldn't be small pieces either. Some satellites are the size of buses, while some parts would burn up. Larger, more robust components could survive re-entry and crash into the Earth's surface at incredible speeds. Imagine chunks of metal, electronics, and potentially hazardous materials raining down randomly across the globe, hitting cities, towns, forests, and oceans. The destruction from these impacts could be immense, and it wouldn't be a one-time event. With gravity fluctuating, satellites would be constantly thrown out of stable orbits. There would be a continuous rain of debris, some burning up harmlessly, others posing significant threats. Predicting where these objects might fall would be impossible. The sky, once a symbol of openness and freedom, would become a source of constant, unpredictable danger. Space launches would become unthinkable, and our reliance on space-based technology would come to a crashing, burning end. Even the International Space Station, a marvel of engineering, would be doomed, its occupants facing a terrifying choice between being flung into the void or plummeting back to a chaotic Earth. Number 8. Nature's nightmare. Plants and animals in chaos. Life on Earth has evolved over billions of years, perfectly adapted to our planet's consistent gravity. Plants grow upwards against its pull, seeking sunlight. Animals have skeletons and muscles designed to support their weight and move efficiently. If gravity began to fluctuate wildly, the entire natural world would be thrown into utter chaos, facing an immediate and brutal existential crisis. Consider trees. Their strong trunks and root systems are built to withstand normal gravity. If gravity suddenly intensified, even the mightiest trees could splinter and collapse under their own unexpectedly multiplied weight. Branches would snap, and entire forests could be flattened in moments. If gravity weakened, trees might be uprooted as the soil loosened, where they might simply float away if not anchored deeply enough. Their ability to draw water upwards from their roots, a process partially dependent on gravitational effects and capillary action, would be severely disrupted. Animals would fare no better. Birds, masters of flight in a predictable atmosphere with predictable gravity, would find themselves unable to control their movement. A sudden increase in gravity could make them too heavy to fly, causing them to plummet from the sky. A decrease could send them soaring uncontrollably upwards, perhaps into dangerously thin air. Their delicate bones could snap under sudden G-force spikes. Land animals, from insects to elephants, would face similar horrors. Skeletons and muscles are unpromated for a specific gravitational load. Quadrupled gravity would make movement impossible for larger animals, their bones perhaps breaking under the strain. Internal organs would be damaged by the shifting forces. Even tiny insects would find their ability to cling to surfaces or fly completely haywire. If gravity lessened, animals might be flung around helplessly with every gust of wind or minor tremor. Hunting, foraging, migrating, all essential survival behaviors would become impossible. Aquatic life wouldn't be spared. While water might buffer some instantaneous effects, changes in gravity would affect buoyancy. Fish and marine mammals might suddenly find themselves too dense to swim, sinking to crushing depths, or too buoyant, uncontrollably rising to the surface. Water pressure itself, a factor of gravity and depth, would fluctuate wildly, stressing or killing organisms adapted to specific pressure ranges. The entire food web from the smallest plankton to the largest whale would collapse, as organisms failed to cope with the fundamental laws of physics betraying them. It would be an extinction event of unimaginable speed and totality. Number 7. Earth itself could be lost in space. Our planet Earth isn't just floating randomly in the universe. It's in a stable orbit around the Sun, a path dictated by the Sun's massive gravitational pull and Earth's orbital velocity. This gravitational lock is what gives us our year, our seasons, in combination with Earth's tilt and a relatively stable environment in terms of solar radiation. If gravity started to fluctuate on a cosmic scale, affecting not just things on Earth but the forces between celestial bodies, our planet's very existence in its current, life-sustaining orbit would be in jeopardy. Imagine the Sun's gravitational pull on Earth suddenly weakening significantly. Earth, continuing at its current orbital speed, would no longer be held as tightly. It could begin to drift outwards, away from the Sun, into the colder, darker regions of the solar system. As we moved further from our star, temperatures on Earth would plummet. Oceans would freeze solid. The atmosphere itself could freeze and fall as snow. Life would be extinguished in a deep cosmic winter. Conversely, what if the Sun's gravitational pull on Earth suddenly intensified? Or if some other massive, unseen gravitational anomaly passed nearby, its pull amplified by fluctuating universal gravity, Earth could be yanked inwards, closer to the Sun. Our orbit would decay. As we spiraled closer, temperatures would soar to unbearable levels. Oceans would boil away. The the surface of the planet would become a scorched, molten wasteland. We could even be pulled directly into the sun, vaporizing our world entirely. Chaos wouldn't necessarily be a simple in or out scenario. With random gravitational fluctuations, Earth's orbit could become highly erratic and unpredictable. We might be flung into a wild elliptical path, swinging perilously close to the sun at one point, and then far out into the frigid void at another. Or our orbit could be destabilized enough that we are ejected from the solar system altogether, becoming a rogue planet wandering aimlessly through the cold emptiness of interstellar space. Even interactions with other planets in our solar system, particularly Jupiter with its huge gravitational influence, would become dangerously unpredictable. A sudden temporary amplification of Jupiter's gravity at the wrong moment could drastically alter Earth's trajectory, sending us into a collision course with another planet, or again flinging us out of the solar system. The delicate gravitational dance that has kept our solar system stable for billions of years would be over, and Earth would be just another helpless piece in a cosmic game of pinball with no rules. Number 6. Constant global cataclysms, earthquakes and volcanoes unleashed. The Earth's crust, the solid ground we live on, seems stable, but it's actually made of massive tectonic plates that are constantly slowly moving. These movements build up stress along fault lines, which is eventually released as earthquakes. Volcanoes erupt when molten rock or magma from deep within the Earth finds a path to the surface. Both these powerful geological processes are intrinsically linked to gravity. The weight of the crust, the pressures within the mantle, and the forces holding it all in a delicate balance. If gravity started fluctuating randomly, this balance would be shattered, unleashing geological hell on Earth. Imagine a sudden sharp increase in gravity. The immense additional weight pressing down on the tectonic plates could cause them to grind together with terrifying force, or trigger massive subduction events where one plate is forced violently beneath another. This would lead to earthquakes far more powerful and frequent than anything ever recorded. Cities would be reduced to rubble in seconds, not just in known earthquake zones, but potentially anywhere on the planet as new stresses rippled through the crust. The ground would be constantly shaking, tearing itself apart. Conversely, a sudden weakening of gravity could also be catastrophic. The reduced pressure might allow areas of the crust that were under compression to suddenly rebound or shift unpredictably. It could also reduce the confining pressure on magma chambers beneath volcanoes. With less gravitational force holding it down, superheated magma could surge upwards with explosive power. Volcanoes, dormant for centuries, could erupt violently and without warning. New volcanic fissures could rip open across the planet's surface, spewing ash, lava, and toxic gases. The sky would be choked with volcanic debris, blocking out the sun and causing dramatic, deadly climate shifts. These wouldn't be ice. With gravity in constant random flux, the Earth's crust would be subjected to an unrelenting series of opposing stresses. It would be like constantly bending a piece of metal back and forth. Eventually, it breaks. The integrity of the tectonic plates themselves could be compromised. Massive rifts could open up, continents could fragment, and the very shape of the Earth's surface would be violently and continuously remade. The internal heat of the planet, normally released gradually, could find numerous chaotic escape routes, turning large swaths of the planet into molten landscapes. It would be an era of perpetual, planet-wide geological upheaval. Number 5. Transportation would become a deadly trap. Our ability to move ourselves and goods around the planet relies entirely on predictable physics, especially gravity. Cars stick to roads, planes fly through the air based on lift and thrust overcoming a known gravitational pull, and ships float because of buoyancy in a world with consistent gravity. If gravity started fluctuating randomly, every form of transportation would instantly become incredibly dangerous, if not completely impossible. Think about driving a car. If gravity suddenly increased tenfold while you were on the highway, your car would be slammed downwards with immense force. Tires would burst, axles would snap, and the vehicle could be crushed against the road. If you were going over a bridge, the bridge itself might collapse under the sudden, unexpected extra weight of all the vehicles on it. Now imagine gravity suddenly dropped to near zero. Your car, along with every other car around you, would become unmanageable, floating off the road, potentially colliding with other floating vehicles or structures in mid-air before crashing back down when gravity returned. Turning a corner would send you spinning into oblivion. Air travel would be even more terrifying. An airplane maintains lift based on a specific gravitational force. If gravity significantly increased, the plane would become too heavy to fly, stalling and falling from the sky like a stone. If gravity drastically decreased, the plane could overshoot its intended altitude uncontrollably, possibly even exiting the breathable atmosphere, or lose the ability to generate lift if the air density also changed. Turbulence would be redefined, not as bumpy air, but as the plane itself being violently yanked up and down by thousands of feet in seconds. Pilots would have no way to control their aircraft. Airports would be littered with wreckage. Ships and boats float because they displace a weight of water equal to their own weight. If gravity fluctuated, so would the weight of the water and the ship. A sudden increase in gravity could make a ship effectively much heavier, potentially causing it to sink rapidly as its buoyancy calculations became instantly wrong. A sudden decrease could cause it to be launched out of the water, or for the water itself to behave so erratically, see point 2, that navigation would be impossible. Even trains reliant on staying on their tracks would derail catastrophically as the forces acting on them changed unpredictably. Moving from one place to another, something fundamental to modern society, would become a life-threatening gamble with almost impossible odds of success. Number 4. Cities would instantly turn to dust. Our cities, with their towering skyscrapers, sprawling buildings, bridges, and complex infrastructure, are marvels of engineering. But they are all designed and built with one fundamental constant in mind: Earth's gravity. If that constant became a variable, fluctuating wildly and randomly, our urban landscapes would be annihilated in an instant. Imagine a skyscraper, a symbol of human ingenuity, suddenly subjected to 5 times normal gravity. The steel and concrete, engineered to support its calculated weight, would be overwhelmed. Floors would pancake downwards, one onto the other, the entire structure collapsing into a pile of twisted metal and pulverized concrete in a matter of seconds. People inside would have no chance. Now picture the opposite. Gravity weakens to almost nothing. That same skyscraper, no longer firmly anchored by its immense weight, could begin to drift or even be tipped over by strong winds or ground tremors, eventually crashing down when gravity erratically returned. Bridges designed to span vast distances and bear specific loads would tear themselves apart. A sudden spike in gravity would snap cables and buckle supports as the weight of the bridge itself, plus any traffic on it, multiplied beyond its design limits. A decrease in gravity could cause suspension bridges to undulate uncontrollably or even float upwards before crashing down. Ordinary houses and buildings would fare no better. Roofs could collapse inwards under increased gravity, or be torn off and float away if it lessened. Walls would crumble out. Underground infrastructure, like subway tunnels, water pipes, and gas lines, would rupture as the earth around them shifted and the forces upon them changed. This would lead to catastrophic floods, explosions, and the collapse of essential services. The sheer density of structures in a city would amplify the disaster. As buildings collapsed, they would trigger chain reactions, bringing down neighboring structures. Debris would fill the streets, making escape impossible. The random nature of the fluctuations would mean there was no safe place. One moment, a building might seem stable. The next, it could be twisting apart or floating into the air. Cities, the centers of human civilization, would become death traps, vast chaotic junkyards of their former selves, almost instantly. The very concept of shelter would be rendered meaningless. Number 3. Your body would be an unpredictable battleground. Our bodies are amazing machines, finely tuned over millennia of evolution to function under Earth's consistent gravity. Our bones support our weight, our muscles move us against it, and our circulatory system pumps blood against its downward pull. If gravity started fluctuating wildly, our own bodies would become sites of unimaginable internal chaos and torment. Consider your circulatory system. Your heart works hard to pump blood up to your brain against the force of gravity. If gravity suddenly tripled, your heart would struggle to overcome this immense new resistance. Blood pressure could skyrocket to lethal levels in your lower body, while your brain could be starved of oxygen as the heart failed to pump blood upwards effectively, leading to fainting strokes or death. Conversely, if gravity dropped to near zero, blood would rush to your head, causing intense pressure, headaches, and potentially burst blood vessels. The delicate balance of fluids in your body would be completely disrupted. Your skeletal system, designed to bear your normal weight, would be under constant, unpredictable stress. Sudden increases in gravity would put enormous strain on your bones and joints. Bones could fracture under your suddenly multiplied body weight. Your spine could compress painfully. Walking or even standing would be agonizing. When gravity lessened, the lack of normal stress could, over time, if one survived, lead to bone density loss, similar to what astronauts experience, but far more erratic and damaging. Your internal organs, normally held in place by connective tissues within your body cavity, would be jostled and pulled in random directions. Imagine your stomach, liver, and intestines being violently slammed downwards, then upwards, then sideways. This could cause internal bleeding, tearing of tissues, and excruciating pain. Your sense of balance, governed by the fluid-filled canals in your inner ear, would be utterly overwhelmed. Constant debilitating vertigo and nausea would make even simple existence a misery. Digestion would become a nightmare. Swallowing relies on gravity to help move food down your esophagus. Without consistent gravity, food might get stuck or even come back up. Processes of nutrient absorption and waste elimination, all subtly influenced by gravity, would be severely impaired. Every breath, every heartbeat, every movement would be a gamble against a force that was actively trying to tear your body apart from the inside out. Number 2. Oceans would unleash unimaginable fury. Earth's vast oceans, covering over 70% of our planet's surface, are held in place by gravity. Tides are a result of the gravitational pull of the moon and sun. Earth's own gravity, or the gravitational forces acting upon it, started to fluctuate randomly. These immense bodies of water would transform from life-giving environments into agents of unimaginable destruction. Imagine gravity suddenly weakening over a large patch of ocean. The water, no longer as strongly bound to the planet, could bulge upwards, forming colossal temporary mountains of water, hundreds or even thousands of feet high. Or vast sections of the ocean could even begin to detach and float upwards into the atmosphere in giant, shimmering blobs, only to crash back down with devastating force when gravity reasserted itself. Coastal areas would be obliterated by these unpredictable deluges. Conversely, if gravity significantly increased either globally or locally, the water would be compressed. This could cause sudden, massive displacements. Water levels could drop precipitously in one area, exposing the seabed only to surge back as tsunamis of a scale never before witnessed when gravity fluctuated again. These gravity-induced tsunamis wouldn't need an earthquake to trigger them. They would be a constant, random threat capable of scouring entire continents. The very concept of sea level would become meaningless. Coastlines would be radically and constantly redrawn. Islands could be submerged one moment and left high and dry the next. The immense pressure changes at depth would crush any marine life adapted to specific conditions. Ocean currents, vital for distributing heat around the planet and supporting marine ecosystems, would become chaotic, swirling unpredictable torrents or ceasing altogether. The water cycle would be utterly broken. Evaporation might increase massively if surface gravity lessened, or decrease if it intensified. Rain would become a terrifying phenomenon. Imagine super-dense raindrops falling with the force of bullets during a gravity spike, or water simply refusing to fall from clouds if gravity was too weak. Rivers might flow uphill temporarily, or carve new destructive paths with every fluctuation. The oceans, the cradle of life, would become terrifying, churning maelstroms, erasing coastlines, and changing the face of the planet with every random pulse of this insane new physics. Number 1. Our sky could vanish or crush us in an instant. The air we breathe, our precious atmosphere, is a blanket of gases held around Earth by the steady, reliable pull of gravity. Protects us from harmful solar radiation, provides the oxygen we need to live, and maintains a pressure that our bodies are adapted to. If gravity started to fluctuate randomly, this essential shield and life support system would become our most immediate and terrifying threat. Imagine gravity suddenly weakening significantly. The Earth would lose its grip on the atmosphere. Air molecules, especially lighter gases like hydrogen and helium, would begin to escape into the vacuum of space at an accelerated rate. More critically, the denser, breathable air closer to the surface would also start to thin out, expanding upwards and outwards. Air pressure would plummet, would become harder and harder to draw a breath. Oxygen levels would drop. It would be like being instantly teleported to a high mountain peak and then even higher until the air was too thin to sustain consciousness, then life. The sky itself would thin, turning a darker blue, then black, even during the day, as our protective atmospheric layer vanished. Now, picture the opposite. Gravity suddenly, violently increases. The atmosphere would be compressed downwards with unimaginable force. Air pressure at the surface would skyrocket to levels far beyond what any living creature could withstand. It would be like being at the bottom of a very deep ocean, but an ocean of air. Our eardrums would rupture. Our lungs would be crushed, unable to inflate against the immense external pressure. The sheer weight of the air above us would be physically pulverizing. These fluctuations wouldn't be slow. They could happen in an instant, back and forth. One moment you're gasping in a near vacuum. The next you're being flattened by an atmosphere as dense as liquid. The very composition of the air around us could stratify and change unpredictably. During moments of high gravity, heavier pollutant gases might concentrate lethally near the ground. During moments of low gravity, the air could become too diffuse to carry sound effectively, plunging the world into an eerie silence punctuated by the chaos of other gravitational effects. Weather patterns driven by atmospheric pressure differences and temperature would become hyper-violent and utterly unpredictable storms, or cease altogether. The sky, our beautiful blue canopy, would transform into either an empty void or a crushing invisible press, making every second an agonizing fight for existence.